guys, we're about to get started. So, welcome to the NYC Airbnb host meetup. We've been doing this for about 3 years now. We try to throw events about every 2 to 3 months. Share information and speakers that are helpful to hosts. So if anyone knows anyone who would be a good speaker for a future event or has a topic they want covered, feel free to catch up with me after or shoot me an email. We try to do topics that are as relevant as possible to hosts, and this is definitely one of them. So there is an agenda that I passed out today. I just want to give everyone a heads up that sometimes these legal issues do get a little bit heated, so please be respectful to the speaker. Please be respectful to each other. We don't need to get into arguments here. I think we're all kind of on the same side. We are going to ask everyone to hold questions until after the speaker is done. Otherwise, I'm sure we will only make it about 1 slide in, because everyone has a lot of questions. So to kick it off, 2 things. I would just like to say thank you to our sponsor, NoiseAware. They helped sponsor this meetup. And what NoiseAware does, and I personally use them in all the units that my company manages in Jersey City, basically what they do is monitor the noise levels in a property so you can find out if there's a party and nip it in the bud before it even happens. They send you a text message, you reach out to the guest, and most of the time that resolves the problem before it becomes a problem with the building or other tenants. So they're great, and they sponsored this meetup. The next thing I want to do is introduce you guys to the law firm that's going to speak. They also sponsored the pizza, so thank you a lot for that. It's Moss & Moss LLP, and I'll let them kick it off in 1 minute. The agenda is here for everyone. Just one thing that I want to give everyone a heads up on is that we do have to be out of this space at 7:50. So we do have a place set up afterwards. We're going to go to the Magic Hour rooftop at the Moxie Hotel. It's 1 block away. The address is on here. They kind of reserved a little space for us, so just ask for the NYC Airbnb host meetup after party, and they'll direct you there. But please make sure that we're packed up and ready to go by 7:50. My agreement with WeWork for giving us this space is that we do have to be, everyone has to be out the door by 8, and we have to put everything back the way we found it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you guys to John Moss, who's going to give the introduction.
Thank you all for coming out. It's a pleasure to see you all. I'm John Moss, partner at Moss & Moss LLP. We're a law firm here in the city. My parents founded it in 1997. We are a general practice law firm, but we have particular expertise with all matters related to Airbnb. Whether you're an individual host or managing property, whether you're an individual host, thank you, or managing property for other people, we'll be happy to help. With me, I've got two of our attorneys, David Beamer and Brandon McKenzie. Brandon will be speaking with you this evening, so let me hand it to him. Woo!
Do you guys hear me okay? Everybody get pizza? You guys love that? Good. Okay, so I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, 30 seconds. First, I want to thank Mike for hosting this, always putting on a great event. Second, I do want to reiterate what he said. We are going to hold questions to the end. I see a lot of familiar faces. I know a lot of you have been here before. We've heard a lot of personal anecdotes, hands shooting up. My neighborhood. This is for the benefit of the entire room. So we're going to keep questions till the end, and we want to keep them for the benefit of everybody. I'm going to look at my phone periodically. That's just so I can keep track of my slides. I promise I'm not checking my Instagram. And I would also encourage all of you guys to come to the networking event afterwards. Having seen a lot of these faces, I know a lot of faces in this room. We have representation from E.com, from Knock Knock City, with real estate agents. Where's Joe? Joe, can you throw up your hand? Right here. That's Joe Comfort. He's a great photographer. If you have lousy photos, good guy to talk to. So stick around afterwards. And with that, I'm just going to dive right in. How many people in here, just by show of hands, know what a preliminary injunction is? Okay, so we got 1. All right, that's a good starting point. It's going to be a little academic then. Basically, what this means is the city tried to pass a law, which Airbnb and HomeAway have affectionately dubbed the home sharing surveillance ordinance. There we go. And what this would have required, had it gone into effect, it was scheduled to go into effect on February 2nd, it means that Airbnb, HomeAway, all of these home sharing platforms that we all know and love would be required to turn over a lot of your personal data right to the city. Names, email addresses, phone numbers, URL to your listing, bank accounts, anything that's very personally identifiable. And that would have gone to the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement. For those of you who are not familiar with that office, that's the enforcement body in New York. When you call 311, that's who you're complaining to. Or if one of your neighbors calls and says, one of my neighbors is Airbnb, that's who gets that phone call, and they're the ones that issue fines and citations. So Airbnb, can we go to the next slide? So Airbnb and HomeAway each launched separate lawsuits against the city of New York, which were subsequently consolidated. And these are the grounds that they sued on. They said, look, the city is asking us to turn over all of this personal data. That's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Who here, anyone know what the Fourth Amendment does? No. Law school.
Protect against unreasonable searches and seizures, which are intended to be warrantless.
Great. Unlawful search and seizure. And in the Constitution of the United States, which I hope you guys are all intimately familiar with if you voted in 2016, you can't unlawfully search the papers of a person or entity. And there's tons of precedent backing that up. And in this case, Airbnb and HomeAway said, you're going through our records and it's warrantless. There's no pre-compliance review. Basically, it's not lawful and it's not narrowly tailored for a good reason. It's unjust. Normally what you do and what the... Normally, what an entity like the city of New York would do, and what the state of New York in the past has done, is sought a subpoena. Or, if you're law enforcement, you get a warrant. It's a lawful way of getting permission to search someone's records, but you have to have a damn good reason. And in this case, the way this law is drafted, they're saying, we want all of the data, and then we'll go on a fishing expedition. We'll sift through and we'll figure out who's breaking the law and who's not. What does that mean for everybody who's not breaking the law? All of their personal data is divulged. So that's not okay. So on these grounds, what a preliminary injunction is it's the judge saying, I'm going to enjoin it, or I'm going to stop this. The law is not going to go into effect on February 2nd on those grounds. This does not mean, despite what I've heard and seen on some Facebook groups, this does not mean that the law is dead. It means now they go to discovery. They exchange their evidence, their information, and there's going to be an evidentiary hearing in May. And they're going to decide, if this goes to trial, whether the law actually still takes effect. So this is somewhat good news for all of you guys. I don't know, for anyone who's comfortable, are you guys all individual home sharers? You're renting out a room in your apartment? Just one. Everybody else is running a business, 200, 300 properties? That's what I suspected. Well, the other arguments, and I won't burn you with the details of this too much, they failed. Airbnb said it's a violation of the First Amendment because part of the ordinance was the law says Airbnb has to put in its terms of service, you need to get the consent of all of your users to turn over the data to the city. And that would be like a pop-up. You log into Airbnb and it says, by continuing to use our site, you agree that we can hand over all your data, otherwise you can't keep using the site. It's not real consent, it's manufactured, it's fake. They're forcing it out of you. Airbnb sued on those grounds, and this is really good for all you guys to know if you're listening on Airbnb. The judge shut it down. You know why? Because he says, you've already consented to that. Right now, Airbnb's terms of service say that if compelled by any local law, ordinance, law enforcement, you have already agreed, if you're using Airbnb, for them to turn that over. So, good thing to know. Search Communications Act, we'll circulate the slides. You guys can get this off here. Again, it's the same reasoning. You've already granted permission. So, do the next slide. Okay, so this is our roadmap. This is what we're looking at. Case Management Conference, May 10th. So you guys get to exhale for a little bit. This doesn't take effect on February 2nd, so you're okay for now. If you're worried, if you're doing anything that you're not supposed to be doing, or have a personal crusade where you feel like you should be doing it, but the city is wrong and we have to vote people out of office, that's fine and good. This is when you have your reprieve until May 10th. Next slide. And if this lawsuit goes the city's way, that's all of the information that the hosting channel is going to turn over to the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement. I'm going to leave this slide for about 5 seconds so you guys can drink that in. A lot of personal data. Can we go to the next? Okay, so you guys are actually not the ones that are personally liable. It's the booking channel itself. If this law goes through, if they lose the lawsuit, and right now it's TBD, then if Airbnb fails to give your data, or HomeAway fails to give your data to the city, it's not you that gets in trouble, it's Airbnb. And for each and every one of you, if it fails, there's a fine. And that goes to Airbnb. It's the greater $1,500 for every period. And the reporting periods are every 30 days. Or all the fees collected by Airbnb or Booking.com for your listing during the preceding year. That's a lot of money. So if you're Airbnb, what do you think you're going to do? I got a pretty good guess. Yeah. They're going to sell you up the river. So now that we've sort of put that aside, the reason we came here today is largely because we want you to know that that's potentially on the horizon. So if you guys want to take steps to protect yourself, now is a good time to start thinking about it. You know, had you come and this law was going to take effect on February 2nd, I would be looking around this room saying you guys should be scrambling, hustling, protect yourself right away. Now you got a couple of months, but I wouldn't backburner it indefinitely and treat this like it's not happening. The city and the state of New York have been trying to pass laws repeatedly for the last 4 years. The multiple dwelling law, the original one, came into effect in 2010. It's like the Terminator. They're not going to stop coming. This is going to happen over and over again. And the reason the Fourth Amendment argument succeeded in this case is because there was no carve-out, no pre-compliance review. So if the city subpoenas Airbnb, they say, we want your records. Airbnb can challenge that subpoena for a neutral party, for a judge, and say, this is overreach, and we want to shut it down before we have to turn over the data. The reason Airbnb prevailed on the preliminary injunction, it's not a permanent injunction, just preliminary, the reason they prevailed is they said there is no pre-compliance review, meaning if we don't turn over the data, we're fined immediately, so we either have to turn it over or we're fined immediately, and it's after the fact that we can sue to sort of get our money back or challenge it. And that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So if you're the city, what do you do? I have a pretty good guess. I'm going to redraft the legislation. I'm going to try to figure out a mechanism for pre-compliance review. I mean, if this doesn't take effect now, there's nothing to say that this won't take effect 6 months, 9 months, a year from now in a redrafted version of the legislation. So I want you guys all to be aware of that. So now that we know what's going on with that law, here's what we're up against today already. I'm sure you guys have been beaten over the head with multiple dwelling law. Basically what that says is if you live in a Class A multiple dwelling, that is typically 3 or more families living independently of one another, so 99% of big apartment buildings in New York. You are not allowed to rent out your apartment for fewer than 30 days unless you're present there. So if you have a spare bedroom, rent it out, cool. In it's either 15 or 16, end of 2015, there's the advertising law. And what that says is if you advertise a listing that would otherwise violate the multiple dwelling law, the minute you put it on Airbnb, that's its own violation for which you can be fined. We have all these other considerations, New York City zoning code, what does your C of O say? If you're in a Class B, that's designed for transient use, bed and breakfast, they're exempt. The roommate exception, this says largely if you rent out one room in, say, a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom apartment, that's a carve-out. It's treated like a roommate. You're not going to get slapped with a fine for the multiple dwelling law. That doesn't mean you're safe. And I saw some of the questions that were submitted earlier where a lot of this stuff's covered. Housing safety. I see this constantly. Anybody in here have a townhouse? Okay. I'm sorry to say this. You guys are low-hanging fruit. If you're Airbnb, why? Because DOB can walk around, knock on doors, and some unsuspecting Airbnb guest can swing open the doors. DOB can say, are you an Airbnb guest? And if they say yes, great. You don't have proper fire exit signs for commercial use, no proper sprinklers. Here's $30,000 worth of fines. And they don't have to navigate 8 floors of an apartment building to issue that citation. So that's also something to consider. And then of course, for those of you guys who are professional property managers, if you're still here It means you've devised a crafty way, probably through software, to manage multiple listings, or you're doing it on behalf of others, because Airbnb is self-policing so as not to garner bad PR with their one host, one home policy. If you have 30 listings on Airbnb, odds are, if they haven't kicked you off already, your days are numbered, and they're going to purge that listing. So right now, it's one host, one home. There are a few exceptions, as long as it's the same physical address. So if you have your entire apartment in a private room, they'll probably let it slide. Next. Okay. I think I touched on this in the last one, but here's all the bad stuff that is likely to happen if you keep Airbnb and you get caught. So citations, hefty fines, those 30,000 I told you about with the townhouses. The other fines for multiple dwelling law violations start a lot lower, but they escalate for repeated violations. So if you've already been issued one, probably not a good idea to keep going. It's no longer the cost of doing business. The first one starts at 1,000, then 5,000, then 7,500. They escalate. Has anyone here had an oath hearing? Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, Department of Environmental Protection. Yeah. Mike's familiar. Let me just ask you. When you went in, did you do anything? Did you say anything? Did you hire an attorney?
I had an attorney, yeah.
Okay. So, bad example. Sorry, Mike's smart. But what a lot of people will do is, and I've seen this out of this group, I've talked to a lot of people where they'll say, yep, I got slapped with a lot of fines, and I went in there and said, yeah, I did it, but the law is wrong. This isn't fair. The minute you say, yeah, I did it, it's over. You're not getting out of it. Those $30,000 worth of fines, that's going to stick. And for some people, it's a lot worse.
Just to be clear, I still paid $4,500. So.
Yeah, but
But it was better.
Yeah.
It was better.
Right?
Better than the alternative.
Half or less?
Probably much less than half.
Good.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like your attorney was worth his money there. All right, next slide. So, here's everybody who's at risk right now, and for different reasons. Homeowners, like I mentioned, those particularly townhouses, they are the low-hanging fruit. Office of Special Enforcement, DOB, these are the people that are going after first right now because they're easy. They can walk up the steps, they can knock on the door, and by nature, we're polite. Airbnb hosts are generally polite. You want to be hospitable. You don't want to have your guests come in the door and say, have the first thing out of your mouth be, if anybody knocks on the door, don't let them in, ask them if they have a warrant. Oh, so somebody's been told that. Okay. So, the new normal. Co-op shareholders, if you live in a co-op, read your bylaws. That's pretty important. Some co-ops, you have a proprietary lease. Your co-op can actually kick you out. So be careful. Condo residents, it's probably even worse. Landlords, this one's interesting. If you own a building, I don't know if we have any landlords here, but if you own a building and you have tenants, and they get a citation, that liability can travel upstream to you. And that the same is true with homeowners. Okay, so some basic strategies while we have time. And I know that for 90% of you, it's not a problem until it becomes a problem. So put a little thing, if whoever has their phones, put a little calendar reminder for like May 1st right now to do all this stuff. You can scrub your listings and stop Airbnb. I'm betting dollars to pesos. Most people in this room are not going to do that. It's okay. That's your prerogative. You can move your listings to, if you're running multiple listings, there are friendly jurisdictions nearby. Mike is living proof. He manages them in a legal jurisdiction in Jersey City. And, excuse my saying so, I don't know if your services are available for hire, but...
They are, yeah.
Yeah. So, Mike's a good guy to talk to, and he obviously knows what he's talking about because he runs these. You can consider switching. If you have a 2 or 3 or like say a 3-family townhouse, and you're worried about liability, now's a good time in the market to consider long-term tenants. And I know I see real estate agents here. So go to the networking event, I'm sure that, sure they can help you. If you are eligible for the roommate exception, this is an interesting one. So full disclosure, I also work for a software company that does this for professional hosts. And one of the tools that this software company has is you can list your home and then make a duplicate listing that is listed. One's is an entire listing, entire room, or entire apartment, and the other is a private room. And you can actually measure the difference, and you can say, what's the downward effect on pricing? Because if the city starts cracking down, and a lot of you guys just become private rooms really quickly, and Airbnb gives over like one of these data purges of 55,000 listings, Do you think the city is going to go after the private rooms first if by and large they're legal? I kind of doubt it. So, modifying your Airbnb host and listing data. This one really applies to any of you who have multiple listings. If you guys have a phone number or an email address and it is traceable across 20, 25, 30 accounts, you're going to be top of the list. So you may want to figure out a technological solution for that, or multiple Gmail addresses that forward to the same place. That's not my advice, that's just information. For those of you who are professional hosts, and for those of you who enlist the services of professional managers, this one's important. You're going to want to look at your terms of service, your management agreements, or whatever that looks like, because most of these that I've seen, and we get people coming into the firm who say, will you help us modify these agreements, or will you review this agreement with this management company that I work with? Most of those have indemnification clauses that assigns liability, meaning if the city comes up and issues a fine, one of you guys is responsible. One of you guys is the owner of the listing. And those terms of service or those agreements will usually spell that out. So if you're using a management company, or if you are a management company, that's something you're going to want to be on top of. We do see this, but less so. You can mitigate your liability through corporate entities. You know, if you form an LLC, but that only goes so far, because certain platforms, Airbnb in particular, require you to verify with government-issued photo ID, so they still know who the person is on the other end of it, and it's going to be a tough sell. If anybody's up against that particular situation, we've dealt with some of those lately, so if you want to come talk to us afterwards, by all means. And then take steps with a professional to ensure compliance. Those of you townhouse owners, like I was saying, you might want to have somebody do a walkthrough, check your exit signs, check your sprinkler systems, any safeguards that are going to protect you from getting those astronomical fines. These are, just so you know, this list is by no means exhaustive. This is a starting point. So I want to give you guys some strategies that you can take away tonight for if and when legislation like this comes down the pipe, so you're prepared. So, what do you do if you're a target? This one's fun. As we discussed, tell your guests, nobody without a warrant. Put it in your house manual right or on your fridge next to the Wi-Fi password, something like that. Admitting fault is probably not going to get you that far. Like I said, I've seen people go through these DEP and oath hearings where they say, yeah, sure I did it, but the law is not fair. You're not winning any friends, you're not paying any less with that. This is a no-brainer, but I don't think I'm going to win a lot of people over here with this one, seasoning potentially illegal activity. If this has already become a problem for anybody, feel free to grab us afterwards. For the rest of you who are thinking right now it's not a problem until it becomes a problem, there's a lot to digest. We're going to circulate the slides, sit with it afterwards, and like I said, calendar reminder, May 1st, keep an eye on this. And we can send periodic updates out to let you know what's going on with the current state of the legislation. But this now has become a matter of when, not if. So I want you guys to have tools to protect yourselves. And of course, for those of you guys that don't feel confident to tackle this on your own, we're available, and if you have your own attorney, that's always a good starting point. No bias. That's it.
So guys, we had a few people who submitted questions ahead of time, so we're going to get those answered first, and then we're going to have about 10 minutes of open questions afterwards. So the first question we have, Brandon, is 1 and 2 family homes were considered exempt from the multiple dwelling law. Does that still hold true with the new law and with the injunction?
Yeah, so I think I did cover this before, but the multiple dwelling law, the way it's drafted, Class A multiple dwelling law is generally specified as three or more families living independently of one another, and the Class A is going to be designated on the certificate of occupancy. You can pull that up from government records if you want to double check. If you don't want to be willfully blind, like you can actually Google that and find out if your building is a Class A. Generally, 2-family homes, if you have a different C of O, you're probably going to be okay, but that does not mean you're completely safe. Like I said, sprinklers, exit signs, if you're using it for commercial use when it's zoned residential, there's still a potential risk, just a different one.
Okay. Next question is, what should you do if you get an anonymous 311 complaint
Against you?
against your property?
Yeah, I mean, so 2 things to note here. If you feel that that's a concern, you can log on to the 311 website, on the city's website, and you can actually track and see complaints. So if you have a neighbor who's saying, look, I know you're Airbnb and you're a pain in the ass and I'm going to come after you, you can go to that website and see if they've lodged any complaints. If somebody shows up at your door, you are not obligated to let them into your apartment, into your house, without a warrant. Let's just say that one more time. You're not obligated to let them in without a warrant, and the burden of proof is on them. They're going to have to show that you are Airbnb, and if they don't have sufficient evidence, that's not going to hold any water at an oath hearing. If they do issue a citation anyway, I would strongly, unless you are adept at this, I know you guys, all 3 law students. Just you? All right. So this guy was 2 up?
1 up.
1 up. All right. 3 years from now, this guy will be able to help you get through that oath hearing. I would not recommend doing it on your own.
Okay.
So where is the site?
I actually don't know the URL off.
If you look up, just Google NYC DOB,
Yeah.
and it's the first thing that comes up. You can look up an address and it will show complaints. Next question is, if you are on the premises, so I'm assuming this means if you're renting out an extra room in your apartment, can the landlord create problems for you of rentals of 30 days or less?
It depends. So that's a loaded question. Generally speaking, the multiple dwelling law has this carve out, the roommate exception, right? There are exceptions to the exception. So if anyone here lives in a rent regulated apartment, if you're rent controlled, if you're rent stabilized, you are not allowed to engage in what's known as price gouging. So if your legal rent is, call it $3,000 a month, that's, if you break that down, you're $100 a day. If you are making more than $100 a day, you are price gouging. The remedy for that is returning the profit. And if you've hosted 100 Airbnb guests, before they evict you, before they can get eviction proceedings through, good luck refunding all that money, tracking them down, and proving it to a judge. Also good to know is if you are in a rent-regulated building or apartment, if you're in a market apartment, we see this a lot. People will get notices to cure, especially from big landlords. They'll have outside counsel or they'll have an in-house attorney and they will send a letter. And they'll say, we know you're Airbnb, cut it out. You have 10 days, and it's generally 10 days, they'll put in the notice, some, write 14. They'll give you a 10-day notice to cure, saying, cut it out or we're going to evict you. If you cure, if you stop Airbnb and you're done and you fix the violation, then they can't evict you. They're not going to evict you for that. In rent-regulated apartments, you don't have that luxury. They can go right to kicking you out.
Okay. Another question is, can you comment on the fact that Booking.com refused to give information to the City of Toronto, unlike Airbnb who did? As their customers, hotels blocked it. Surely this might be an interesting avenue to pursue when New York City comes back at Airbnb to force the city into an adversarial position with hotels. Wanted to know what the legal strategy would look like. So I guess Booking.com refused to give data in Toronto, and Airbnb handed it over. So.
Yeah, God bless them. I'm a big fan of Booking.com. I think they're great. They're represented here. I don't know if they want me calling them out, but what I think that really boils down to, I can't comment on the internal legal strategy. I don't know, what their in-house counsel has behind their desks. What I will say is this, and I did bring this up before. I know for a fact that in Airbnb's terms of service and in HomeAway's terms of service, you all have already consented to that data being turned over. I don't know that the same is true for Booking.com. I have not read their current terms of service because I'm sure that is updated very frequently and adapted by jurisdiction. I applaud them. I think it's cool at Booking.com. I don't know if it's sustainable, and I don't think it's going to protect everybody if and when this law or some variation of it takes effect.
Okay. Last one, we kind of got into this already, but I'll let you reiterate it. I have a 3-family home where I live with my child. The duplex below me is used for my holistic health business. And when I don't have clients, I rent it on Airbnb. Since I have a startup home business, would I still be subject to getting a fine?
So, loaded question. that's going to turn on the facts. The two things that I flagged there are they said 3-family home, so look at the C of O. And number two, depending on how it's structured, I'm guessing they probably don't have a hotel license, but maybe you do. And in addition, I don't know how your building is specifically zoned. If it's zoned for commercial use, you might dodge that bullet. And if you also have complied with the building maintenance code, ventilation, exit signs, methods of egress, you might be okay. Without knowing the specifics of your situation, I can't say definitively.
So guys, now we're going to open up the floor. We have about 10 minutes for questions, so I'll let Brandon pick whoever has questions.
Sure. I'm going to call on a bunch of people. I just want to say, if we can try to avoid personal anecdotes and we can ask questions that are for the benefit of the group, I would much prefer that, but I can't stop you once I call them.
Yeah, I asked the question earlier about the one call because I actually received a complaint today. I looked up on the UOB website.
Okay.
So I understand if they don't, I can't come in if I don't want them in.
Can you speak a little louder?
The tenant actually saying,
Take that.
sure. If the enforcement agency shows up, I know I won't let them in, but what's to stop, nothing can stop a tenant, Airbnb tenant, from letting someone in.
Sure.
So where does it go? Say that there should be a bunch of fines. Even if I refuse them and they come back, where does it end?
No, so generally what happens is you're going to be issued a citation and you're going to get a hearing date. And that's through the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. Has anyone ever been to DMV court, traffic ticket, tried to fight it? Okay. You go in this little, sometimes there's a courtroom, sometimes you go into a little office and there's a guy behind a desk with a computer who hits record. Those are what are known as administrative law judges. Those ALJs run the hearings. And if you don't show up for that hearing, you're going to get what's known as a default judgment, meaning you automatically lose. So the best thing to do in that situation is, again, I don't know how to say this without sounding biased, but hire an attorney, have somebody go on your behalf, provide them with all the relevant facts. They'll ask you for X, Y, Z, and let them argue it on your behalf. If you've been issued a citation and you can prove that it's false, that you weren't Airbnb, you're probably in great shape. If you were, all hope is not lost. There are avenues to plead down or to cure the violation. If you say, look, my guy's not going to admit, or he's not going to admit this, he's not going to deny it, but let's just agree that this isn't ever going to happen again, cut the fine in half. Or in Mike's case, a third, because he had a good lawyer. Yeah.
So I get what DOB does when they come and give the fines, if sprinklers and all that other stuff that you said. Sure. You said that the special enforcement office is going to be the one that would get all that information on us personally?
Yes.
What were they planning on doing with that information? I'm confused who does what in the government organization.
Did everybody get that? That's actually a really great question.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way the law is drafted right now, all that data is turned over to OSE, the Office of Special Enforcement. And there are safeguards built into the law that say, hey, they're not supposed to just turn it over to anybody willy-nilly. However, there is a carve-out that says at their discretion, OSE's discretion, they can turn it over for law enforcement purposes or other legal purposes. That opens the door to FOIL requests. Does anyone know what a FOIL request is? Yeah, all right. Freedom of Information Law. That means if OSE gets that information and your landlord has a good reason to believe that you are Airbnb and they submit a FOIL request and they say, this person's doing something bad, it's possible, and this is one of the arguments that obviously isn't settled, but this is one of the ones that was raised in this lawsuit saying your landlords might all find out, or DOB might find out. But generally speaking, if and when this law takes effect, there's no provision that says, it's actually the opposite of that. There's no provision that says we're just going to share this information loosely. Yes.
On the review period. So you said that Airbnb would be required to give up the information during the review period.
Yes.
What's the review period? And the question I'm asking is, if this starts on May 10th, is the review period backwards or forwards?
So that's a good question. Right now, this remains unsettled. There was a hearing on December 18th for notice and comment. That's basically whenever the city passes a new law. The office that's passing the legislation will say, hey, everybody come out, tell us what you think of the law. And this is how we're going to try to enforce it. Give us the arguments for and against. And the unwashed masses come out and start yelling and, you know, what have you. In this case, I just wanted to clarify one thing. This is not taking effect on May 10th. There's a conference and an evidentiary hearing to determine how the lawsuit will move forward. Now, in its first iteration, the way it was set up, the law was to take effect on February 2nd. And the first reporting period was going to be February 2nd to May 30th, with Airbnb, HomeAway, all the major OTAs and booking channels reporting on, March 30th. On March 30th, and then subsequently every 30 days. So the end of April for the last month, the end of May for the prior month, and that's how it's structured, and I suspect that if and when this takes effect, that's how it's going to work. Yeah, I highly doubt. No, I don't think this is going to go retroactive. I'm going to say with a lot of confidence it's not going to be retroactive.
What was the question?
She asked if it would be retroactive, if the law takes effect, if the city ultimately prevails in this lawsuit, if they'll just say, you know what, let's go all the way back to February 2nd when this should have taken effect, and we'll capture that. I would be very surprised if that were the case.
What was the question?
If Airbnb declares your income for tax purposes, would the city have access to this? Right now, within the scope of this law, I mean, look, if you're reporting your Airbnb income, the Department of Finance is going to have that information anyway. It's just a different body. Under the scope of this law, no. They're getting different information. They're not getting your tax information. All right, throw me a curveball, law student.
I'll keep it short and simple. So I received about 2 notices to cure. Just your typical we entity present evidence as to why they did it. So we just basically what we did is they charged us they went to their in-house counsel and they billed us for their attorney fees, and then they said just don't do it again.
Yep.
So my first part of that question is, can they do that? And 2, if we pay, does that mean we admit or deny? We didn't say anything. We just straight up just paid and just moved on.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily an admission of fault, and what that's going to turn on largely is what it says in your lease, and whether or not, if you've signed a lease agreement, you may have consented to paying attorney's fees for them taking action against you for a violation or perceived violation of your lease. I've seen a couple of these. I've had a few clients in the last couple of months where they get these notices to cure, and they just say attorney fees are X, clause 8 of your lease, where you agree that if you're breaching the lease, I'm going to sue you. So in this case, it's really going to turn on the facts, like what your lease says, and there's a lot of nuance there. Like I can go down the rabbit hole on this all day long. I've seen cases where landlords will keep the entire security deposit, which generally is not allowed. And if they charge those attorney's fees, it's even more not allowed because there are the arguments I've seen from landlords is it's a penalty, which generally isn't allowed. A security deposit for a specific person is not supposed to be punitive, or it's liquidated damages. Liquidated damages means we can't reasonably approximate the harm you've done, so we're just putting the number of your security deposit on it. But if they charge you $300, $400, $500 for that attorney writing you a letter, then they've put a number on it, and it is no longer liquidated damages. So there's you can go down the rabbit hole with that. The short answer is you probably haven't admitted fault, and as long as you've cured, be thankful and walk away.
So just about you said that when you reported they not find any restriction, should you not report your Airbnb or anything?
I'm not going to tell you not to report, not to pay your taxes to report your income.
Okay.
If anybody else is feeling bold, no. Generally, what I see most people do is they put it on their income tax return under a Schedule C or a Schedule E. I am not an accountant and I am not a tax attorney, so do we have an accountant?
No, I deal with this hotel tax question. I'm an attorney.
Okay.
And in fact, I have some very recent success on this issue. Beyond, I had 2 years ago, I litigated an issue basically with the city of New York and many of you probably know, the city has claimed in the past, as has the Attorney General, that you're obligated to pay hotel taxes. That was, if you recall, the New York Attorney General subpoenaed Airbnb about 2013. That was their argument. So I took on the city of New York after I took on the Attorney General and beat them both on this issue. And I just got a refund, in fact, for a client who had paid the hotel taxes for 4 years. And so people should know that if you paid hotel taxes, that there's no legal basis for it. And I can get you a refund.
That's a good guy to talk to if you have.
There's also some other big issues we're litigating right now in Supreme Court that you didn't mention. I don't know, there's so many cases going on, it's hard to be aware of everything. But there are some significant problems with what the city's doing right now. We're challenging, we have 3 motions to dismiss that we filed back in May, and the city's asked for 3 extensions of time, and they finally answered, but their answers are absurd, and they in fact admitted in their last response that their arguments are absurd, because the Mayor's Task Force, or Office of Special Enforcement, for one example, was created simply by Mayor Bloomberg by a stroke of his pen. That violates the city charter. And I've litigated that now, filed my reply in criminal court today. I'm litigating, like I said, in the Supreme Court, and the city does not know how to make a coherent answer on this question. That's one thing. Also, the ECB, or Oath, where they litigate these tickets, is a completely rigged operation that doesn't enforce the state or federal constitution. That's one of our motions. The city has admitted it, and then they denied it, and then they admitted it. So I don't know how the judge is going to go on this question. I don't see how we can lose this argument. The city of New York is not subject to the state and federal constitution. In addition, the law they prosecute is BS. They actually have been prosecuting since 2012 the city's code, not the local dwelling law. It's really convoluted, but it's BS. And so that's the 3rd motion. So anyways, there's a lot of stuff, and also they're prosecuting 1- and 2-family dwellings, not just multiple dwellings, since, as long as I know, since 2011. So anyways, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I would not assume that what the city's doing is legal, because it's not. What the city's doing is completely illegal on many fronts.
All right, guys, we have time for 2 more questions.
I just wanted to go back to the timing of the injunction. May 10th.
Yeah.
What's the worst case, and then what's the maybe case, likely case?
Can everybody hear that?
Kind of what?
Just going back to the injunction timing, the next hearing is May 10th, according to him. I'm just kind of curious what the worst case is for folks like us, and then likely case, and then just timing.
Sure. So there are a few possible outcomes. What we saw in the 2014 state subpoena is ultimately the 2 sides, they effectively forced one another to the table and settled, and Airbnb voluntarily turned over a lot of your data. So that's one possible outcome. Another possible is that the city goes back to the drawing board and tries to redraft legislation. And the probably most likely outcome in this case is come May 10th, they're going to have a conference, and then the judge is going to set the calendar for trial. He's going to say, you exchange, there's no trial by surprise in New York. It's not like you see on TV. It's like, here's all my evidence, here's all my evidence. And everybody gets to see everybody else's cards, and then they'll litigate. And whoever has the better argument is going to win. It's tough to say how long that could take. I will tell you this is a very long preliminary injunction. You have a lot of parties. There's 52 pages. This could be a couple weeks of trial for all I know. And after that, if the city prevails, they might be like, great, law is taking effect, lickety split. So that's why I say around the beginning of May is if you're just going to keep pushing through, I monitor it pretty aggressively, and you can keep in touch with us. We can keep you guys updated on developments. Take one last question from the guy who's dressed better than I am.
So, city prevails. Worst case scenario, they get a bunch of data. Currently, they have 2. I don't know. currently they have two avenues of pursuit. I guess one is the DMV tickets, the illegal online advertising and all that stuff, and the other is the transient occupancy. Those are the two main ones I know of that I've been interact with. So data goes to the city.
Yep.
What happens in terms of what are they going to enforce? Are they going to say, hey, we have a listing here, and clearly that was a violation, so here's, because currently, as far as I know, they can only come after you if they get a complaint. So they can't actually walk down the streets of New York and say, hey, you're Airbnb, here's a fine. They can only come after you if somebody has made notice, right? So now Airbnb gives them all the data. What does that mean?
It's a good question. And if I'm the city and I have records of 55,000 hosts and records of building certificates of occupancy, and I know exactly who's in a Class A multiple dwelling, and that they have ongoing reservations, I might stumble into somebody's apartment based on an anonymous complaint, or I might just do it anyway. And I'm not saying this is what they're going to do, but if I'm you, and I'm and I'm OSE, and I come knocking on your door, and I issue a citation, the burden of proving how I got to your doorstep is almost irrelevant. Like, you've got a pink sheet of paper in your hand, and it's already a problem. And you can challenge me on it. That's fine. I'm not guaranteeing you're going to win.
But problem
Yeah, but that's theoretical, because what he's asking is, do they have a plan once they have this data?
As of right now, my understanding is no.
Yeah.
Or if they do,
They give citations purely based on what they find online. No complaints on my property, multiple complaints, they came in, a guest let them in, multiple citations.
Yep.
They go on Airbnb site, and they look for most used, listings, and they go stake it out.
I think what she's asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is do they have a strategy? Are they going top down, 30 listing hosts to 5 listing to 1? Now, remember, it's already a violation of the law to advertise. So you don't need a complaint for that. All you need to do is go online and be like, that guy's got an Airbnb listing and I can prove it.
What does OSC look like? Are they in police uniforms?
They're
are they
just like you and me.
Okay.
Male, female.
Is it a human? Is it a dog?
So